Naturally, when I meet people and we start talking about upping your productivity game, how do you get more things done in the week? The next question that comes up is, well, how do I efficiently plan my week? I don't want it taking hours and hours, Shane, to plan my week because I have work to do. I got stuff to get done. Well, if you've asked those questions, you're in the right place. A lot of people ask me, how can I plan my week in the least amount of time possible so I can get the biggest return? Another way is looking at what's the simplest or easiest way, Shane, so that I can plan my week and get on to the business of the business.
Welcome to This Week's Plan, where we help you transform possibility into reality. We help you accomplish the right things each week so you can enjoy a more balanced life, both personally and professionally. Join in as we share real-world, battle-tested strategies and techniques to help you center your focus, accelerate your results, and improve your momentum to avoid being overwhelmed. This isn't just about making it through the week. It's about fitting in all the right things. Now here's the host of This Week's Plan, Shane Fielder.
And I want to remind you that our purpose together is to help you fit in all the right things into your week. You're not going to be able to do everything. So if that's a myth that I've just shattered, if I've just blown your world apart, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry because you're here, you're in the right place, and this is going to help you take your productivity and your game to the next level. Because the short answer that I'm going to give you later on in season 1 of this week's plan is you're not going to be able to get everything done. And so you're going to fit in all the right things to get the right things done. Guess what has to happen to the rest of it? It has to be negotiated. It has to be delegated and given out and deferred and put out into other people's quality, capable hands to do so that you can get on to doing the things that you're good at. That's a whole different conversation. That's probably this week's plan, season 2, 3, 4, 5, and 20. It'll take us a while to shift that for you, but we will get that. We will get there. So our purpose here is helping you fit in all the right things so that you can accomplish the right things. Now, science or art? Long time ago, I had a sensei who said to us, you guys are martial artists. And he had us all sitting on the mat and wasn't sure if he was going to lecture us, but I know that the training was really intense that day and things weren't going so well. And he just kind of sat down and he said, here's the deal. Martial art. And he looked around the room and he said, martial art. And we were all like, okay, yes. And he said, part martial. The martial part is the scientific part of it. We can teach you techniques, turn here, move here, duck, dive, punch, kick, all that kind of stuff. But there's an artistic side to it. And it's taking the scientific side of things and customizing and making it beautiful. And so he went on to then talk about how our martial technique should be beautiful. It should be as beautiful as dancing or ballet or any of the other rhythmic arts. Well, this is a planning art. When you get into productivity and you're talking about what do I accomplish in this next week coming up, Shane, it's a weekly planning art. So I want you to think about going into this, that when you sit down to construct a really great weekly plan, it's going to require some scientific stuff, which I will give you through season 1. But it's going to require some artistic flair, personal interpretation, your own pizzazz, your own flavor, your own interpretation of things applied to you. So never let somebody tell you that here's the 5 steps to this or 7 steps to this or the 3 ways you have to do this, because guess what? I've never yet found one resource where they listed out 5 ways to do something and I just went, and the sky parted and the clouds parted and the sun came out and the birds were singing and there's like, this is your 5 steps and like, I'm good for the rest of my life. It's just not happened yet to me and it probably hasn't happened to you either. Now, my job here is to help you find the piece that will unlock the next step for you, the piece that will make sense to you, and that would be my contribution and gift to you. High achievers generally have one similarity in common, and that is we as high achievers generally overestimate the amount of things that we can accomplish in the short run. But we largely and grotesquely underestimate what we can accomplish in the long run. And guess what? We also underestimate the power of consistency in accomplishing those things over that long run. So how do you do this efficiently? How do you plan this week out efficiently? Okay, why do you want this to be efficient? Why does this have to be an efficient process for you? That's the first question I have. But when we get into it a couple layers below the surface, when I hear questions like that, the real issue is a little phrase that I have called structure equals freedom. Structure equals freedom. It's always a structural issue. So you want to accomplish a lot, you want to get a lot of things done, you want to just max out your productivity because at the end of the day, you're seeking some level of freedom. If I can get all my work done early, I get to go home early. Great. I want freedom. If I can get all these projects accomplished, guess what? I'm next in line for the next promotion. If I can get this stuff done, the client's going to be super happy and they're going to hire us for more business or they're going to retain us longer. And so that's freedom. And so I want you to consider right now, what freedom are you going for? Now, it's structural. To get to freedom, it requires structure. So where do things go? When do they need to be done? How do they need to get done? That's what we're going to explore in today's episode. Okay, number one, knowing when you're going to plan. I want you to pick the same day each week. It doesn't really matter which day. However, I'll cover this in the next episode next week. We're going to talk about which day, the science around it, why you should do it on a certain day versus another day. But you know what? I had an old friend and he said, any day ending in a Y is a good day to do anything. I thought it was a little gimmicky at the time, but it works. So next session, we'll cover that. But just for now, just pick one day. If you're working the traditional Monday to Friday week, is it Friday, Saturday, or Sunday for you? Some people even go to an extent and go, hey, Monday mornings. Works for some people. So just pick one of those four today and we will move forward. What's your goal for your planning session? This is a critical question not many people ask. What's your goal for the planning session? Now, in this period of time, this chunk of time that you've set out to weekly plan, what should this accomplish for you? Because you need to be very clear. Once you're clear on what you have to accomplish, that will really give you a bird's eye view, an overview actually. It'll give you a detailed view if you want about how much time is required to efficiently plan. So in every week that you're going into and you're setting up your weekly plan, it's going to require 3 components. Now these 3 components should be done in successive order. What I want you to be very mindful of and intentional is, are you trying to accomplish all 3 of these as part of weekly planning? Or can you actually separate them into different blocks, get them done ahead of time, and then come into the weekly plan, right? So the first session is the cleanup session. And this is where you're going to sort, organize, get the paper stuff and the digital stuff talking together, get them harmonizing, get them working together, understanding what you're working with. You want to at this time also get a handle on your email inbox, those messages, messenger alerts, Slack, whatever other digital communication forms that you have in your universe, get that all kind of going together. Now, this is not the time to clean up and go to zero inbox. That's a different project for a different day. What it is just getting a grasp of what is on fire, what's not on fire, what could become potentially problematic for this upcoming week that you need to deal with now. That's the cleanup session. Next on the list is the weekly review. This is a specific time where you look back at the last 7 to 10 days. Where did you win? What surprises came about? What priorities changed? It's incredible to think about the amount of priorities that change on a day-to-day basis today. Now, the reality and the truth is that your priorities change because other people's priorities change. The reality and the truth underlying that is that their priorities change because one of 2 reasons. There's actually things changing and moving, which is ebbing and flowing, and that's great. Or guess what? They don't have their act together. And so because they're maybe a little more disorganized or chaotic, that spills over into your life. Well, you're in the right place because over the next season, I want to walk you through the different strategies so that you can be one of those people that's a lot more immune to other people's chaos and stress and poor priorities. And we can actually start managing back in a more appropriate way. So the weekly review is really looking back at that last 7 to 10 days and really dissecting what was awesome, what wasn't, and what needs to be focused on in the upcoming week. After that, we then go into prioritize and forecast. Now, prioritize and forecast becomes the starting point of your weekly planning session. So in this session, we're looking at what needs to most happen next week. I mean, there's going to be 1 to 3 things that just must happen. I mean, if you don't sign off on the payroll or push the payroll approval button and your employees don't get paid because it's payroll week, that's going to cause you a lot of headache. If you don't go on date night or invest time into your family or personal relationships, you're going to end up a lonely person one day. So there's a few things that must happen. You must get a good level of sleep and some exercise and eat well. Those are all must things. So what are those things that must be done and must happen for you next week? And how much time do you need to allocate to those things, and where in your calendar should you be allocating them? Now, the next question, which is a very powerful one, is what can be pushed off onto other weeks? Where can you renegotiate things and say, man, next Wednesday afternoon, I really had planned to work on the XYZ thing, but guess what? I got this ABC opportunity and it's stellar and I need to capitalize on it. So now we got to go back to the parties that are involved in the XYZ thing. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's just you, and then renegotiate a time. What a lot of people typically do is they go delete and they forget about it. But then sometime down the road, the XYZ thing does become a reality. So we do want to go back and renegotiate with the XYZ people and say, hey, I have to shift priorities. I have a conflict. I have something that's come up. And depending on who's who, you may be able to be more transparent and truthful. You may not. But at least say, look, I just need to renegotiate this time. Could it happen the following week? Could it happen 10 days later? And guess what? You will have a more successful chance of renegotiating the focus and the effort that's required. You may run up against an obstacle where they say, hey, no, like you're at the end of the road. You've hit the wall. The deadline is coming up. The timeline's due. We need your contribution. That's a different situation we can figure out another day. But I want you to start asking what can be rearranged, reprioritized. Okay, at this point, I just want to remind you that this episode is sponsored by our no-fail planning methods. So all you have to do is go to nofailplans.com. And we actually have 8 no-fail planning methods that will stop you from hacking your way to productivity and actually give you some substance that will help you in a very concrete, real way add on to your weekly planning process, add on to your current productivity practices. So that is going to be our gift. We're going to purchase that course for you because you are a listener to this week's plan. All right, the next thing that we need to be considering and how to efficiently plan your week out is your time budget. Your time budget. So this is where a lot of people say, Shane, what's the most economical or efficient way that I can plan out my week? And there is no right answer. I mean, I could say 27 minutes and I'd be like, oh, okay, great, 27 minutes and off to the races they go. But that's not what we want. So we want to understand how much time do you really need? Now, based on what we just talked about, if you're doing a big combo session where you are combining the weekly look back and you're looking at the sorting and the organizing and doing all of that, you might need 3 hours. I mean, there was a time and a space where I would pick every second Friday afternoon into the evenings, and at least minimum once a month, I would do like a 4 to 6 hour purge. And sometimes people wouldn't believe me. They would say, oh yeah, Shane's not in the office Friday night. And I remember one time my manager was present for that conversation and he said, no, he is. Because I see those emails once or twice every Friday night on a couple times a month. I see the emails at 8 or 9 o'clock at night coming out. And that would be my time to just do like a more of a monthly or a bi-weekly purge where I would just go in and just blow off a whole bunch of stuff and get things organized and really containerized so that my next couple of weeks would go really well. But let's focus back to this week. Let's set a time budget that's appropriate for you depending on what that time needs to accomplish. Now, if you're doing your cleanup and you're sorting and you're organizing in a different block, great. Plan a time budget for that. If you're doing your weekly review and you've decided to kind of compartmentalize that, that could be 20 or 30 minutes. And then now what's the prioritize and forecast for the next week? That could be another hour. So just pick a time right now arbitrarily, estimate it, and then let's move forward. Now, the key thing around efficiency and effectiveness always is, what's the ROE? What's the return on effort that you want from this planning? I realize that you don't have 6 or 10 hours to sit there in planning because you probably will feel like you're never getting any work done. But it was Stephen Covey who, back in 2002, I entered into the Franklin Covey. They had a 7 Habits coaching series. It was an elite mastery coaching series, and it was a 1-year program. You had to join for an entire year, and all you did was learn how to master the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I remember when Stephen Covey and his master coaches had said, hey, for every minute that you spend in planning, you can save yourself 10 to 12 minutes in execution. And I think that number I don't have any science to back that up right now, but I believe that number is it's actually multiplied. It's gotten larger, more toward the 20-minute mark, because we have an exponential amount of interruptions and distractions than we did in 2002. I mean, think about it. Think about what was your tech stack in 2002. You probably had a desktop computer. You may have had a laptop computer. You may have had like a tiny little cell phone, and that might have been about it for you. And maybe a calculator in the bag, and that was your tech stack, and that was really awesome. I remember still having a separate camera and cell phone and all that stuff, and I had a Palm Pilot back then. I thought I was like really high tech, and I had like 5 devices, and one day I realized like, I think I'm like Batman. I'm like Batman. I have a whole bunch of stuff on my belt. So now we have more distractions. So the minute you get out of doing good quality deep work and you get distracted, guess what? You have to go back and revisit that. So I think they were right when they said every minute of planning can save you 10 to 12 minutes of execution. So I think that that's correct. So what kind of return do you want? So to me, it's like, if you want a good return, invest into that. So that may up your number a bit. And it's okay if it's an hour or 2 hours. You still are talking about your 40 to 50 hour traditional work week. And then depending on what you're wanting to accomplish, that's just work. What about your personal life? What about your personal ambitions? That all has to be factored into it. So I want you to figure out what is the balance for you, knowing that all the variables are going to change by midweek next week. Yes, no matter how good of a plan that you set out, there's going to be variables that'll change. The people and the work and the constraints and the priorities might not change, but guess what? You might just be generally exhausted because you've been going running extra, or you've worried a little bit extra. And so you've got mental fatigue or physical fatigue, and that's a variable change. Something may happen in your community, or something may happen to some friends or family. That's a variable change. And so something may happen, like some positive opportunities, some positive news. Your sports team wins the championship cup or race. You're excited about that. And you celebrate that a little longer than you maybe wanted. That's a variable change. So it's not all doom and gloom. Let's remember that our lives are exciting, our lives have possibility, and there's great opportunity, but the variables will change. They'll move around a little bit. They'll bump up against each other. So we need to be planning and mindful of that. So let's just pick a time right now that works for you. 30 to 90 minutes. Let's go. You really have one reality. Your reality is time, and time exists in clocks and calendars. Let me say that again. Time exists in clocks and calendars. Right? We know we can measure 60 minutes on the hour. We know we have a clock that tells us what time it is. And we know we have calendars that have blocks of time that tell us what can happen in that magical 24 hours that's assigned to each of us. And nobody is better than anybody else. I haven't met anyone that said, hey, I figured out I was born with 25 hours. Nope. Everyone's got the same 24. But what happens in clocks and calendar is that's the place that you put your structured blocks. Now, you need a couple different structured blocks. First one is, what are the physical structured things that you need to accomplish? Put those in the calendar first, right? That's the report you need to work on, the research you want to do, the collaboration meetings that you want to have happen so that you can innovate a project or move something forward. Those are the important time blocks that you really need to have on the calendar first. What's the second what's the second block, Shane? I just about let it out of the bag there. The second block is transition or buffer blocks. Transition or buffer blocks. You need to have time in between things. Why? Because things are going to run over. And that could be for an opportunity. It could be that, you meant to talk to somebody for 30 minutes and guess what? You guys got into a massive debate. You guys were talking for 29 minutes and the key idea emerged and you're like, we can't leave until we flesh out the salient points on this before, we need to get it all on the whiteboard or whatever happens. You need time for transition. Anybody ever get stuck in traffic? It's fine that the mapping program on your phone might say, hey, it's going to take you 27 minutes to get here. And then you don't realize that somebody got into a fender bender and it's 47 minutes by the time you walk in the door. So we need to build in some of those buffers. You're going to need to be a human being and use the restroom or the washroom. You're going to need to have a snack and feed and water yourself. And you're going to actually want to actually insert a couple just breathing and thinking moments. And I've been there. I've had those days where it's meeting after meeting stacked upon each other and you do a Herculean effort and you think you're going to be Superman or Superwoman and you're going to go in there and just do it all. You might be able to do that for a short run, like a day or two, but it's going to cost you in the end. And so we'll talk about that cost later on in this season. The third one is your free time or your opportunity blocks. Free time, opportunity blocks. I grew up in the hospitality industry, and in that industry, we had something called MBWA, Management by Wandering Around. And there was times where, like the great hotel managers, the great facility operators, these are the people that would just set time to go and wander. And they would walk around the facility, and they didn't really have a set agenda. Sometimes we did. Sometimes we would be walking around and looking at cleanliness. Sometimes we'd be looking at signage and presentation. Sometimes we'd be evaluating employee performance. How were the employees interacting with the guests? What were they doing? Every business requires some management by wandering around time, where you can just be present in the business. Now, I know in different days and ages that can change. We're living in more of a virtual world. More virtual meetings are happening today than ever before. But you can also structure that with text messaging, phone calls, and other things. But you just want to have that flex time in your calendar. You want to have that time so that when somebody says, hey, I got a grand idea, do you want to explore it? And you can say, hey, great. Why don't I call you in a couple hours? I got some time in my calendar today. And they go, awesome. Like they weren't expecting to get in your calendar today, but they can get in. It's like, awesome, right? So have that time for yourself, have that time for other folks. Digital and analog. Make sure you have all of that stuff together. If you want to efficiently plan out next week, make sure you've got your devices together. Make sure you got your old school notepads, journals, papers, books, reports, banker's boxes full of stuff, like whatever you need, pens, paper, scissors, rulers, tape, have it all together. Post-it notes, fill your boots. Just make sure it's all in the same spot that you are, and then we can go to town and construct and architect a really awesome weekly plan. So we've reached this part of the show where we want to activate. We want to actually get you into some action. I know I've kind of leaped over the activation early, and I've been asking you a ton of great questions, so you may need to go back and revisit or re-listen to this episode. But this is the part where I really want you to give some thought as to what step are you going to take from here. All right, my friend, you get one life, and we want to do it right. So now, what part of today are you going to implement? What have I said today that's been most helpful to you that you really want to go out and implement? What are you committing to as a result of joining me today? Now, let's start here. Which day will you assign 1 hour to at least start or enhance your weekly planning process? Second, what will you accomplish during this time? And be intentional. Are you doing the cleanup? Are you doing the review? Or are you doing the prioritize and forecast? Are you doing one of those three or all three together? And then set your time budget accordingly. Looking into the prioritize and forecast part of the week, where can you insert a few blocks of structure? Structure to get the must-do things done. Where can you put in that transition or that buffer time structure? And then, where can you put in that free time and that flexible opportunity time? So that could just catapult your week into a game-changing positive week. And that's what I want for you next week. Okay, so make sure to become part of the show. Send us your question. When you go to thisweeksplan.com, you will see a black box there. It's a black form. You go in there, you type in your question to me, and then I can put you into the show in future episodes. So I'm looking forward to that, and we'll get back to you and answer your question. Today's question was brought to you by David from Minnesota. David's been a longtime dojo member with us. He's an implementer member as well. And a while back, he'd emailed in to me and he said, hey, Shane, how do you select your top priority? And what are some strategies to find and protect the time for that top priority? It's a great question, David. And I've had a similar conversation and answers with members like you. So here's the deal. Your top priority probably needs to be broken down into what's your top priority? What's the other people's top priority, right? Let's start there. Let's break it into two priority stacks. What's important to you? What's important to other people? Because let's be honest, there's going to be things that you are going to manage and handle and contribute to this week that's not going to excite you, but it's exciting to somebody else. And so let's make sure that we honor that person or honor that group or honor the task and put that into one of those structured blocks so we can get it done. And then guess what? What's more important is that people honor you back because they know you're dependable. They know they can, and they value your contribution. Hey, if I give something to Shane and he commits to getting it done, I don't have to follow up with him. It's there next Wednesday like we agreed upon, and it's delivered, and then everybody else can get on to the next part of the project or the task or the plan. And so that's exciting. Now, priority, I actually use a different little 3-part system. So I use the MBSE. And so it's a 4-part system if you break it down. So it's mind, body, spiritual, emotional. So I actually look at what are my priorities for each component. What is my mental priorities? What are the things that I need to do this week mentally? And that could mean working on some reports, research, studying, working on a course that I'm like some of my own personal growth or professional growth course, read a book, whatever. Physical, body. So that could be, what am I actually producing with my body? What am I actually, the places and spaces that I need to attend? I will go there. And I also look at what is my physical rest and relaxation and exercise priorities for the week, and nutrition and all that stuff. Spiritually, I look at, okay, how am I doing on the spiritual front? And I like to remind myself that I'm a spiritual being as well. And I have an important part in the whole, universe, and I'm an important part of humanity, and I have to contribute, and I have to give and serve and help. And so I remind myself of those things and ask myself, what are my priorities there? And then emotional. What are my emotional needs that week? And do I need to have a week of solitude and more quiet time? Or is it a week where I want to be at the party and I want to be out with friends or out volunteering at different things? And so I think if you could just take that framework, mind, body, spiritual, emotional, filter in the things happening in your world through that, that'll really quickly give you a head start onto prioritizing things. You can go to other things like the ABC method, the 1, 2, 3 method. You can use all sorts of task planners in many different electronic formats. But really, I think it's really important is what's important to you, what's important to other people. Harmonize the two together, and you'll be off to the races. So in our next episode of season 1 for this week's plan, we've been talking about a lot of core foundational elements, but next episode will be, when should you do your weekly planning? And so we're actually going to dive deep into that question we started on today about like the actual day and which day should it be and why and all that kind of good stuff. And I'll have some really interesting things to present to you then. So it's been really fantastic, you honoring me with some time that I could build into your week and build into your life. So thank you for that. I want to encourage you to forge ahead this week with confidence, to start with a reasonable time budget in your calendar for your weekly planning activities. Let's get next week's plans set up, and let's have an awesome week coming up. And then agree to just modify and adapt the plan every day as you go. It's a daily event from there on in. We haven't even started talking about daily planning, so that'll be later on, maybe even in season 2. So I'm excited to be in the journey with you. I'm Shane Fielder. Thanks for joining us today. Domo arigato.
We appreciate you joining in this episode of This Week's Plan. For more complimentary resources and strategies to help you develop greater work-life harmony, head to samuraiinnovation.com/podcast and become a dojo member when you claim your free resource that's waiting for you. You'll also find more techniques that will leverage your potential and grow your business exclusively at samuraiinnovation.com. We look forward to helping you fit in all the right things on the next episode of This Week's Plan.